Hey guys, it's Mike from Make Time Online, and today it is all about 13 effective ways to create the best blog headlines. So you probably already know that your headlines can result in you getting more traffic to your website. But most bloggers kind of struggle to create a great headline that relates to their article. However, there have been so many studies and so much research into what are some of the best ways to make your headlines stand out. But before we go into that, I just want to share a couple of really important facts that a lot of people are not even aware of. One of them is that you get less than 5 seconds to make someone's mind up to whether they want to actually read or click on your article. So it's only a very short amount of time to have an impact on someone. And also, there's actually 8 out of 10 people will read your headline, but only 2 out of 10 people will even read the first line of so only 2 out of those 10 people will actually click on your headline, which is why some people even recommend spending half of the entire time it takes to write a piece of content on the headline. That's an overly generalized rule, I would say, and some people may not spend as long, and it's definitely one of those things that is a skill that the more you practice, the easier it will become. But it just shows how important your headline can actually be on getting people to read your content in the first place. So it's kind of like an art combined with a bit of science. So there is like the emotional pull on what your headline can do, but there's also some scientific facts that have been proven from studies that suggest they are a better way to create a headline. So what I'm going to focus on today is particularly the science, the studies that people have done in the past to show like what you can do to make your headlines more effective today. And then towards the end of this podcast, I will actually even share a proven formula, like a headline formula of what you can do, which you could try and hit, at least 50% of your posts using that formula, because it is a certain style of post that's going to work. So anyway, 13 best ways to make your headline stand out. Number 1 is to use a number at the start. And by this, I just mean it's basically a list post. Conductor has done a study before which showed that the overall headline preferences, and there were 36% more effective from people that used a number at the start compared to some other headline types, such as like how to, or addressing the reader, or a normal. So for example, 30 ways to make drinking tea more delightful. That was more effective than a reader addressing one, which was something like ways you need to make drinking tea more delightful, or how to make drinking tea more delightful. Basically, putting a number at the start was more effective than any other type of headline. And there are different ones. This is going to be one of those podcasts which is probably easier to see the show notes. So if you just go to maketimeonline.com/headlines, all of this information is there if you want to see all of it in more detail. Number 2 is odd numbers get 20% more clicks than even numbers. It's a bit of a weird one, and I can't really actually tell you exactly why, but by using an odd number rather than an even number, it's been proven to get more clicks from readers. Number 3 is using capitals for the first letter of each word. So in this study, sentence case was basically the capital letter for the start of each sentence. Capitals was using all capitals, and lowercase was using a capital letter for the first word and then lowercase for the rest. And they found that there was 64% of people clicked on the title that used sentence case, whereas 21% clicked on capitals and only 7% clicked on lowercase. So just by using that simple rule of the first letter in each word being capitalized, that is more effective, basically. Number 4 is to use 70 characters or less. So this has actually increased over the last few years. Basically now titles on Google are longer than what they used to be. It used to be only 57 characters or less. So it's kind of showing that over time Google is allowing and showing longer headlines than what they have done in the past, which is probably a sign of what is to come as well in the future. A lot of people tend to think of using only really short headlines as being like the best way to do it, but actually those it kind of links onto like those longer tail keywords. So if you've got a longer tail keyword, that can still be shown all in Google search results now as well, because they are getting slightly longer. But you do want to make sure it makes sense and grabs attention. That's the really important thing there. Basically though, because they are getting longer, what is shown on Google, don't worry about scrimping and saving or like really cutting it down and being specific on the characters. Make sure your title actually makes sense and grabs attention. That's the main thing. Number 5, which kind of links onto that, 6 words has found to be optimum in the past. So there's been studies which have shown that 6 words is the ideal length. And if you use a tool such as like coschedule.com to figure out what is the best headline for you to write, they actually have that in there as well. However, linking on from the previous point, longer headlines are still being shown in Google and people are tending to read them. So it's more important to actually make sure your title makes sense rather than being like, oh, this is only 6 words, I'm just going to leave it as that, or cutting it off short. Make sure it does still make sense. Number 6 is stacking your targeted keyword at the start. So CoScheduler actually found that readers tend to skim headlines and tend to only take in the first 3 words and the last 3 words, which is why 6 words is optimum. But if you have a choice of where to put your keyword, always try and move it to the start as much as possible. Number 7 is using a strong adjective, or called a superlative, at the beginning of the title, but do not overuse them. Another study by Conductor found that half of the respondents actually preferred a headline with only 1 superlative or 0. So 1 or 0 was the best way. Not 1 superlative stood out the most compared to any of the other, with 29% of the clicks coming from that. But the whole point of that study is the fact that people actually prefer not to just have a load of adjectives chucked in. However, using 1 did come out best from the study. So just using 1 of them at the start is a great tip. Number 8 is to scare people into clicking with a negative superlative. So if you think of just general news articles, quite often it's those negative words and some like the worst headlines, which often are the ones that you see. And it's because that is human nature to click on negative things, believe it or not. So an example is 11 worst things that will destroy your business. So if you can make an article about some of the worst things rather than 11 best things to boost your business, that has typically found that they perform 30% better than positive headlines in a study by CoScheduler. Number 9 is, if you're thinking of using a question in your headline, the only question word that does very well is how, and it's usually a how-to title. So BuzzStream actually did a study which looked into the 10 worst shared phrases in titles, and among those phrases were what should, would you, are you. So if you're thinking of putting a headline with a question in it, maybe think again, because they are often some of the worst performing headlines, believe it or not. Number 11 is to use the most shared keyword phrases. So BuzzSumo's research, you can see that Max Wolf has broken it down into easy to see phrases, and he found what people shared the most on different social media platforms such as Facebook and like engagement with it. He found that some of the best ones by engagement were something like "this is why" or "can we guess," and phrases which actually draw people into the title itself. Number 12 is to use power words and create emotion. So you probably already know there's so many power words out there, and if you just do a simple Google, you can find a whole list of hundreds of power words that you can use. But also the Co-Scheduler tool does give a great idea of whether your title is using power words in there. And this is quite often going to be your superlative, your strong adjective at the start of your title. And number 13 is to use a bracketed word. So if you have a title and then at the end of your title you have a bracket, so the square bracketed, use the square brackets and then put something like infographics or templates or interview, whatever it is that is included, they found to get 38% more clicks than headlines without that. So now you may have heard all of that and thought, oh man, I don't even know where to start with all of that. So what I've done is I've actually broke it down into a blueprint, and it's like the top performing headline blueprint that you can use over and over again. And there's basically 4 parts to the blueprint. So the 4 parts are odd number plus superlative plus keyword plus additional once. So once you've actually decided on the topic or whatever it is that you want to write about, it's important that you do your keyword research. However it is that you do that, I'm going to get someone on the blog in the future, actually, and coming up in the next few weeks, who is an expert on like SEO and keyword research and things like that. So that would be a really good one for making sure that you understand how you do your keyword research, because obviously you want a keyword that a lot of people are searching for, but something that you're actually going to be able to rank your website on Google for. Because if it doesn't rank on first page of Google, you're not going to get any traffic from Google searches, basically. So once you've decided on your keyword, if you can find a way to turn it into a list post, so you have a number, ideally an odd number, then use a strong adjective, a superlative, then your keyword, and then your additional once. And the way that you can find the additional once is by going to Google. So let's just walk through an example here. Imagine you are writing an article on fat loss tips. Now, just so you know, that keyword is probably super hard to rank for. So if you are in that niche, that's probably not the best keyword. You might want to make it a bit more long tail. So that means, more specific. Best, it could be fat loss tips for runners. That's a longer tail keyword. But if you type in fat loss tips into Google, you can see that the highest number on the page is 77. It says something like the 77 best fat loss tips. So that means, first of all, you want your odd number to be higher than the highest number, because human nature as well is to click on the number that's the highest. People want to know the most tips. People want to see, quite often you will associate the highest number with the best post to look at. And the higher, if you just think about it, the higher the number is, the more chances there are of you finding something that might be more useful for you, something that you don't already know. So once you've got that number, so let's say that your number that you're going to go for is 85. It's an odd number, it's higher than 77. That's rule number 1. The next part is the superlative. And so on the first page of Google, you can actually see that some of the superlatives that are used are things like effective and best. So effective fat loss tips or best fat loss tips. And then the next thing that you want to do is check to see if there's any common additional once. So for example, the top 4 in the top 5 headlines, 4 of them mention experts or backed by science, which is a similar kind of